Hi, my name is Kyle Farmer. I'm a business immigration attorney, and I help strategize with employers on how they can legally fill and defend their labor forces. And I wanted to go through a topic today that I find particularly interesting, and it's a process that I am familiar with and understand that it causes a lot of employers a lot of stress. And that is, I want to go through the 5 tips for when the Department of Labor comes knocking. But before we do, I want to get into just a little bit of housekeeping. Uh, During the process, what we're going to do here is we're going to go through a presentation on the screen here, and then in the meantime, you can be filling in the chat box with uh, filling in the chat with any questions that you have, whether it's H-2A compliance, H-2B compliance, compliance with the Fair Labor Standards Act, whatever it may be. Or if you have any immigration related questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. You don't have to do it to everyone. You can direct it just at us so that it remains confidential. And then after we get through the presentation, I'll go through the Q&A and answer any of the questions that you have. And hopefully that's helpful for you. But uh, right now, let's go through the 5 tips for when the Department of Labor comes knocking. All right. But before we do get into the tips, I do want to go over how you'll know when you're being audited. It's a pretty important thing, and a lot of people don't know this, but what the Department of Labor normally does, and I say normally because they don't always do it this way. There are exceptions, but the exceptions are just that, they are exceptions. So as the rule, the Department of Labor will notify you, that basically just send you a letter, and the letter just says, hey, you're being audited by the Department of Labor under these sections, the Fair Labor Standards Act, MSPA. If you file H-2A or H-2B applications, it'll specifically mention that if they know about it at the time. Sometimes they get into these audits and don't even know that you filed those applications. But so anyone can be audited. A lot of times audits are prompted by people being reported to the Department of Labor for perceived violations of the Fair Labor Standards Act or some other applicable regulation. The Department of Labor will go in and check it out. Sometimes it's not like that at all. Sometimes the Department of Labor just has an initiative where they're going to audit this many employers that fit this criteria during this calendar year. That's happening right now with some H-2A stuff. So there's a lot of H-2A audits out there right now. But you'll know that you're being audited because of the letter. And so let's go through the auditing process in a nutshell. First thing you'll do is you'll get that letter, and then the investigator will schedule a time to have an initial conference with you. They'll send you a list of documents that they need, and it's just a template list that they have. They send it out to everyone. And they'll schedule what's called an initial conference. A lot of times, at least pre-COVID, the initial conferences were held with multiple Department of Labor investigators. I usually saw 3. It seems like lately it's been limited more to just 1 or 2. But pre-COVID it was 3, sometimes 1, sometimes 2, but usually they have more than one person there. And so it can be kind of an intimidating thing. But they basically will come in, ask you a bunch of questions about your business, about your workers, about your application reviewing processes, those sorts of things. And then they'll go and they'll talk to your workers, past workers, present workers, people you fired, people that have quit, people that you rejected their applications. They can talk to all these people just to see if they see any violations with applicable employment law. And then they'll go through, they might ask for some supplemental documentation, they might not, but usually they do. They'll ask for supplemental documentation. You provide that. Eventually you have what's called a final conference. You don't even have to go to the final conference if you have an attorney, but the final conference is where they go and they tell you what violations they found, any civil money penalties that you might owe for the violations of whichever provision, and any back wages that you might owe to people. So And then afterwards you have the opportunity to appeal it, to go through their findings, and this is where attorneys are extremely valuable, at least ones that know what they're doing during this process. Uh, this is the opportunity to really negotiate all that down and to go through and scrutinize their back wage calculations to make sure it was all done right. Uh, but let's get on to it. Let's get to the 5 tips for when the Department of Labor comes knocking. The first one should be obvious, but most people don't do it. You want to contact your attorney. And contact an attorney that has experience handling Department of Labor audits, investigations, and appeals, because there's a lot of you have to have a lot of familiarity with this type of law to really appreciate why the Department of Labor is asking certain questions, what questions they're going to ask, what type of information they're looking for, when you have to provide it, when you don't, those sorts of things. So make sure to talk to an attorney that actually has experience in Department of Labor audits. And if you need one, you can reach out to us. You just email us at info@farmerlawpc.com, or you can call us at 512-894-2128. But just whether you use us or not a big deal. But just make sure that the attorney that you're using does actually have experience in this particular area of the law, because it is it's pretty specific here, and there's just a lot of value that's gained through experience. So contact your attorney. It also tends to make the process go smoother, because the Department of Labor they don't tend to be they don't tend to be as aggressive in at least their dialogue. They might still ask for the same information, but their conduct changes a little bit, their dialogue changes. And I've seen it to where investigators go from, extremely combative to not combative at all. And I don't know if it's part of their tactics or not, but at the end of the day, that does happen with some of them. Not all investigators. A lot of investigators are just good investigators. But yeah, so you just make sure to contact an attorney. This is a big one. This one's hard for employers because it's frustrating. You're working all the time. You're trying to make your business grow. If you're trying to complete any projects that you have, you're just wanting to work, and the Department of Labor comes in to investigate you. It's frustrating because it derails that. It's time consuming. You don't know why they're asking all these questions, so you get frustrated. And a lot of times what people do is they get hostile towards the Department of Labor. Now, this doesn't really help anyone, because more times, the vast majority of the time, the Department of Labor has the right to be there and the right to ask the questions they're asking and collect the information they're collecting. So it doesn't really do you any good to be hostile towards them. The other thing is you, by working with them, you can get some more flexibility in terms of turnaround time for documents and those sorts of things, maybe limiting the scope of audits. So it just doesn't, they're just people doing a job. So, you don't want to get hostile towards them. It doesn't do you any good, doesn't do them any good. And it just makes the process more difficult and more frustrating for everyone, really. So I know that it's difficult to not be hostile towards them because you're frustrated. It's like being pulled over while you're driving. It's the exact same thing. It's that same level of frustration, but you got to just kind of keep it cool and understand that this is just a job that they have to do, and more times than not, they have the right to ask for what they're asking for. So you don't want to be hostile towards them. You also don't want to obstruct their investigation. Now, what's that mean? Well, so like I was mentioning earlier, you're going to go through a process where you're talking with the Department of Labor, and you're answering their questions, whatever questions they might have in this initial conference. And afterwards, they're going to get your workers' contact information. So they're going to reach out to your workers. What I mean by don't obstruct the investigation is I mean, don't call your workers and say, "Hey, this is what you need to say," or uh, "Hey, don't talk to this person," or really anything. Just don't do that. It doesn't do you any good, and it's against law. So don't obstruct their investigation. That in all reality, the cards are going to fall where they're going to fall, and it's going to be more about dealing with it. But obstructing the investigation, from what I've seen, tends to make the situation significantly worse. So don't obstruct the investigation. Even if you're really close to your workers, that's kind of the common thing. That's the common theme to people that obstruct investigations. They're like, "Hey, this person's like my family," so I just wanted to talk to them and give them some advice. But it's like, yeah, that the person, and that might be true, and the person might accidentally tell them things that are a violation of whichever regulation the Department of Labor is looking into. But there's not. It doesn't do you any good to obstruct it. It just is going to end up getting you in trouble. So don't do it. Whenever, this is the fourth tip, when the Department of Labor is asking for documents, or when your attorney is asking for documents or information, be responsive with them. If you participate in the H-2A or H-2B program, you can actually be debarred from using the program for not being responsive with the Department of Labor. So you definitely want to be responsive. When they're asking for documents, you want to get them by the time they ask for them, or if not, at least notify the Department of Labor as to why you're not and when you can expect to get it to them. That keeps the process moving, keeps them from getting overly aggressive, and it makes the process smoother. So be responsible with the Department of Labor and with your attorney. The fifth tip is a tough one, but you want to stay calm. I can't tell you how many calls I've got from employers that are just panicking because they're being audited by the Department of Labor, and oftentimes it's not even because they know of something in particular that they've done wrong. The concern is that they've done something wrong that they didn't know was wrong. That happens all the time. It's not. That's certainly not an uncommon thing to be concerned about that. It's the fear of the unknown that makes people pretty worried. But the process, it's a long process. It usually takes months and months and months. I've seen them take over a year, and then especially if you're appealing it, which you pretty much should appeal their decisions because it gives you an opportunity to negotiate. But you got to stay calm through the process. You don't want to panic. You just want to lean in on your attorney and say, "Hey, you're the person with the experience here. What do you need from me? How can I make this go smoothly for you?" That's going to be the most cost-effective way to get through the audit. And panicking really doesn't do anyone any good. So just stay calm and keep on keeping on. A question I get all the time is, what can I do to avoid an audit? There's not really a good way to avoid an audit, so to speak, except for having really good internal reporting systems. So whenever let's say that you're an H-2A employer and the workers arrive to your location, go through the process with them of how they can report an alleged violation or anything that they're disgruntled about directly to you, so that y'all can handle it internally, and you can go through a process where they feel heard, where you check the legal boxes and you do the things that are legally required of you. And that's a really good way to avoid audits because it helps reduce the likelihood of the potential worker reporting one. A few other things that you can do is, whenever you are interviewing U.S. applicants, again, in the instance that you're an H-2A or H-2B employer, and you're interviewing U.S. applicants, be very thorough with your documentation. I mean, I don't care if someone answered the phone or not. You need to document this is my name. This is the company that I represent. This is the person that I tried to call. This is the number I called. This is the email I tried to uh, send an email to. Here's a copy of the email. I left a voicemail. Were they hired or not? If not, why? It needs to be some lawful related reason why. Just be very, very thorough about documenting those sorts of things, and it'll make your life a lot easier in an audit. Because sometimes they'll come in and they'll say, "Hey, I need to see this." You'll show it to them, and they'll be like, "Okay, I see the disposition of this case, and that's good. That's it." So that a lot of times that'll be the thing that kind of saves your skin. So thoroughly document hirings, firings, interviews, all those things. Be very thorough with your documentation. It's very persuasive evidence to the Department of Labor. Have good internal reporting systems for your auditing. I mean, for your workers reporting any sort of issues or anything that they're frustrated with. And those are pretty much the best things you can do to avoid an audit. And again, because it reduces the likelihood of that one potential, which is being reported to the Department of Labor. So that way you can kind of handle it internally before it ever escalates to that point. Uh, yeah. So for more information or to request specific topics, or you can speak directly with me, you can reach me here. Uh, but yeah, so feel free to reach out. Now, and I do want to take an opportunity to also let you know that the audit process, so the process of the collection of documents, of the reviewing of documents, and all those sorts of things can be very time consuming in an audit. We do have a compliance company called Ag Workforce. In Ag Workforce, one of the core goals of Ag Workforce is to make sure that H-2 employers are audit ready. So when the Department of Labor comes knocking, you have all the documents they can request very quickly and turn it over to the Department of Labor. This looks really good to the Department of Labor. It saves you unbelievable amounts of time. So if you would be interested in talking to us about any sort of compliance related issues, you can also reach out for an Ag Workforce connection. So yeah, let's move on to the Q&A.